The ancient Greeks had no skill with electrical wiring, power cables, and radios, and this fact sheds light on their habitual scorn for physical science, which they saw as a rather lowly business. But only they could construct temples, carve images on columns, and cut precious gems of such beauty and delicacy that we can only compete with them by presenting our most artificial tools. Without conducting experiments and supported only by everyday perception, the Greek philosophers have influenced and in large part governed the course of Western thought for over 2 millennia. The didactic virtue of Socrates has been revived in the scrawnier categorical imperative of Kant. The Platonic doctrine of the ideas has been revived in the aesthetics of Schopenhauer, and the philosophical framework of the atomistic theory of chemistry stems directly from Democritus. Faced with these facts, it is not more likely that the Greeks avoided physical science not because of their lack of capacity for such study, but because they chose not to have any dealings with it, ? Perhaps their mystics might enable us to recover many insights that have been lost to us. Let us take another example. The Chinese of antiquity would have seen all our modern discoveries as alien to their culture. The modern Chinese would feel the same way towards these discoveries had we not compelled China to accept them by force. We are likewise impressed with the great Chinese philosophers, sages such as Lao Tzu, etc., who speak to us in words of such wisdom that even Goethe seems like a mere bungler by comparison. Thus, if the Chinese did not possess a science with whose assistance they might have been able to build cannons, blow up mountains, and grace their tables with margarine, that is because they had no desire for these things. Behind the scenes, certain forces are controlling mankind. It is only by examining these forces that we can understand a crucial fact. Before the progressive research of modern times could be undertaken, the intellectuals had to be conditioned to adopt a philosophical theory upon which would be founded a required practice. We call that practice capitalism. Oh shoot. Klages kind of knows the score here. He goes on to say, don't mistake it. What we call quote unquote progress is nothing but the lust for power, is what he calls it. He says it's the lust for power and nothing else besides. That's what he calls progress, or AKA in modern terms, liberalism. And what else he goes on to say about capitalism and time in the ancient Greeks, right? Because he doesn't stop there, man. He really knows how to talk shit. He says, there can be no doubt we are living in the era of the downfall of the soul. And this is from a speech in 1913, Man and Earth, or Menschen Erde. There would be still large personalities under such circumstances, right? The death of the soul. We certainly do not wish to underestimate the ingenuity of the masters of technology, nor the computational talent of our captains of industry. Nevertheless, if one placed such mere talent alongside a true creator's strength, we must surely come to the conclusion that technology is without the slightest capacity to enrich life. Did you hear that? Technology is without the slightest capacity to enrich life. The cleverest machine has meaning only in the service of a purpose, right? This is why tool worship means nothing. And even the most extensive industrial organization of today will be nothing in 1,000 years, right? No one's, at the end of the day, no one's going to remember Kellogg's. No one's worshiping at the temple of Kellogg's. No one's going to remember random politician number 1,267. No one's going to remember the next imitation of an imitation. No one's going to remember any of these corporations other than after when they leave this planet, like when we leave this planet, like you can see depicted in a movie like Wall-E, let's say, right? That's why they'll be remembered, nothing else. Probably some of the most hated people in history, honestly. When we think of those who once proclaimed, okay, so Klages goes on to talk shit. Technology can't enrich life. The cleverest machine has meaning only in service of a purpose. And even the most extensive industrial organization of today will be nothing in 1,000 years, whereas the poetry of Homer, the wise words of Heraclitus, and the symphonies of Beethoven belong to the undying treasures of life, right? Some things are timeless. Capitalism was a moment in time, right? Like bugs in amber. But how sad we become when we think of those who once were justly proclaimed to us as the most illustrious of men, pseudo-men. When we look at our poets and thinkers of today, whom do we have still, since the veterans of the spirit and the deed have departed? Burckhardt, Backlund, Bachoff, Mommsen, Bismarck, Keller, and even Nietzsche. The last flame from that old fire right before that world went up in flames, which he called, by the way. He's like, these people are crazy. They're going to blow the place up. It's going to be a bloodbath. And then that happened. And to this day, people are still scratching their heads about it. So all of them gone without a trace, without a successor. It is empty. It's funny. It is as empty up on Parnassus as it is in politics and thought, and we will maintain a discreet silence of regarding the putrefying arts. So he's not optimistic about the future, as you can see. Remember, this is 1913, over 100 years ago. When we come down to the level of everyday life, we can see very clearly the total nihilism behind all the commonplace chatter about personality and culture. Oh yes, it's so shallow, it's terrible. Copies of copies of copies. Most men do not really live, they merely exist, some to be used up as if they were mere machines in the service of some great undertaking, right? This was Kurt Vonnegut Jr. in Player Piano when he said, that men exist as second-rate machines to serve the machines or something along those lines. Or maybe it was somewhere else where we got that. I'm not 100% at the moment. So that's excerpts from Clogis's Earth or Man and Earth. And now we're going to resume our talks on David Foster Wallace's E Unibus Pluram. And that's not by mistake that I began there talking about technology and industry, because where we left off in E Unibus Pluram was specifically where we are in the past, right? It's 1990, and we're looking at an exciting future here, right? Are you ready for this? It's going to change the world. We're moving from a television culture, to a TC, a telecomputer culture. In circa 1990, not a lot of people still had it. The public, the average people, no one, the masses hadn't ruined the internet yet, you could say. It was brand new. People were already using it, and it wouldn't really take off for a few more years. But even in the 1990s, you had tech writers talking about this sort of thing. So David Foster Wallace is basically giving you a review of what our telecomputer future looks like. So I want everyone to listen really closely here, because this is all quite incredible. So I'm going to begin at the very beginning here, end of the line. What responses to television's commercialization of the modes of literary protest seem possible then today? One obvious option is for the fiction writer to become reactionary, fundamentalist, declare contemporary television evil, right? It's like saying technology is evil, fight against it, but he says most of us will take nihilism over Neanderthalism, right? Even though violence is common in our modern world, and it is getting more common. Another option is to adopt a somewhat more enlightened conservative right? Conservatism that exempts viewer and network alike from any complicity in the bitter stasis of televisual culture, and instead blames all TV-related problems on certain effects of broadcasting technology. This is where George Gilder comes in to give us our preview of the future. And what Gilder says about the telecomputer is that, one, the discerning consumer instincts of the little guy could correct all imbalances if only big systems would quit stifling his freedom to choose, and that, two, tech-bred problems can be resolved with technology, right? Just chasing our tails here, Gilder's basic report and forecast runs this: television as we know and suffer it is a technology with supreme power but deadly flaws. The really fatal flaw is that the whole structure of television programming, broadcasting, and reception is still informed by the technological limitations of the old vacuum tubes that first enabled TV. The expense and complexity of these tubes used in television sets meant that most of the processing of signals would have to be done at the networks, a state of affair that dictated that television would be a top-down system, in electronic terms, a master-slave architecture. A few broadcasting centers would originate programs for millions of passive receivers, or dumb terminals. By the time the transistor, which does essentially what vacuum tubes do in less space at lower cost, found commercial applications, the top-down TV system was already entrenched and petrified, dooming viewers to docile reception of programs they were dependent on a very few networks to provide, and creating a psychology of the masses, in which a trio of programming alternatives aimed to appeal to millions and millions of Joe briefcases and Susan social medias, now billions. The passive plight of the viewer is aggravated by the fact that EM pulses used to broadcast TV signals are analog waves. Analogs were once the required medium, since with little storage or processing available at the set, the signals would have to be directly displayable waves. And analog waves directly simulate sound, brightness, and color, but analog waves can't be saved or edited by the recipient, right? We learned to record them, but you couldn't edit them. You had to edit the physical tape. They're too much lifelike. They're in gorgeous toto, one instant and then gone. What the poor TV viewer gets is only what he sees, with cultural consequences Gilder describes in apocalyptic detail. Even high-definition television, HDTV, touted by the industry as the next big advance in entertainment furniture, will, according to Gilder, be just the same vacuous emperor in a snazzier new suit. Not a new suit, but a snazzier suit. But in 1990, TV, still clinging to the crowd-binding and hierarchical technologies of yesterdecade, is for Gilder now doomed by the advances in microchip and fiber optic technology of the last couple years. The user-friendly microchip, which consolidates the activities of millions of transistors on one 49-cent wafer, and whose capacities will get even more attractive as controlled electron conduction approaches the geodesic paradigm of efficiency, will allow receivers, TV sets, to do much of the image processing that has hitherto been done for the viewer by the broadcaster. And in another happy development, transporting image through glass fibers rather than the EM spectrum will allow people's TV sets to be hooked up with each other in a kind of interactive net instead of all feeding passively at the transmitting teat of a single broadcaster. TV sets to be hooked up with each other in a kind of interactive net, right? The internet. So, TV sets to be hooked up with each other in a kind of interactive net, get you off the transisting teat of a single broadcaster. And for a little bit, the internet was free before. Now corporate America owns it. In case you guys didn't notice, like 3 or 4 companies own the internet and all of social media. It's all been centralized. Do you see that? Like, no one's going to independent places anymore. Seldomly. It's only larger companies that compete. And when it's an oligarchical monopoly, right? I told you antitrust laws were an accident in this country. They never meant to exist long. Anyway, so since digital signals have an advantage, this is where saying, and fiber optic transmissions have the further advantage that they conduct characters of information digitally. Since digital signals have an advantage over analog signals in that they can be stored and manipulated without deterioration, as well as being crisp and interferenceless as quality CDs. They allow the microchip television receiver, and thus the TV viewer, to enjoy much of the discretion over selection, manipulation, and recombination of video images that is now restricted to the director's booth, right? And there's this ongoing joke in this, not joke, the ongoing reality in this is about how whether it's writers or Joe Briefcase himself, how everyone's trying to aspire to, director, actor, what he calls as harried clipboard production status, right? And if you think of social media and content creators, it is very much what was provided. It was another treadmill, a la, like, I guess with the way all the tech companies own the internet now, it really does parallel that Black Mirror episode, 15 million credits, because they've basically what was once a free domain or a freer domain or a freer market, again, when a few large captains of industry come in and steal everything or take everything or force everything, no one has a choice. They never have. So, Gilder is here with his optimism. Hold on one second. Get you in the director's booth. So for Gilder, remember, conservative tech writer out of the 90s, the new piece of furniture that will free Joe Briefcase and Susan social media, well, no, they invented Susan social media, from passive dependence on his furniture, right, going to free you from the television, will be the telecomputer, a personal computer adapted for video processing and connected by fiber optic threads to other telecomputers around the world. The fiber's TC will forever break the broadcast bottleneck of television's one active, many passive structure of image propagation. Now everybody will get to be his own harried guy with headphones and clipboard. Oh, uncanny. In the new millennium, U.S. television will finally become ideally GOP-ishly democratic, egalitarian, interactive, and profitable without being exploitative. He hasn't seen 15 million credits. Boy, does Gilder know his larger agenda audience. You can just see saliva overflowing lower lips in boardrooms as Gilder forecasts that the consumer's whole complicated, fuzzy, inconveniently transient world will become broadcastable, manipulable, storable, and viewable in the comfort of his own condo. With artful programming of telecomputers, you could spend a day interacting on the screen with Henry Kissinger, Kim Basinger, or Billy Graham. Rather ghastly interactions to contemplate, but then in Gilder, into each his own. Celebrities could produce and sell their own software. You could view the Super Bowl from any point in the stadium you choose, or soar above the basket with Michael Jordan. Visit your family on the other side of the world with moving pictures hardly distinguishable from real-life images. Give a birthday party for Grandma in her nursing home in Florida, bringing her descendants from all over the country to the foot of her bed in living color. And not just warm 2D images of family. Any experience will be transferable to image and marketable, manipulable, consumable. People will be able to go comfortably sightseeing from their living rooms through high-resolution screens, visiting third-world countries without having to worry about airfares or exchange rates. You could fly an airplane over the Alps or climb Mount Everest, all on a powerful high-resolution display. We will, in short, be able to engineer our dreams, our own dreams. In sum, then, a conservative tech writer offers a really attractive way of looking at viewer passivity and TV's institutionalization of irony, narcissism, nihilism, stasis. It's not our fault, it's outmoded technology's fault. If TV dissemination were up to date, it would be impossible for it to institutionalize anything through its demonic mass psychology. Let's let Joe Briefcase, the little lonely guy, be his own manipulator of video bits. Once all experience is finally reduced to marketable image, once the receiving user of user-friendly receivers can choose freely, Americanly, from an Americanly infinite variety of moving images, hardly distinguishable from real-life images, and can then choose further just how he wishes to store, enhance, edit, recombine, and present those images to himself in the privacy of his very own home and skull, TV's ironic totalitarian grip on the American psychic cojones will be broken. Oh man, sorry, it's just the irony is funny, right? So irony is tyranny, but it can also be really, really funny. Note that Gilder's semi-conductive vision of a free, orderly video future is way more upbeat than postmodernism's old view of image and data. The seminal novels of Pynchon and DeLillo revolve metaphorically off the concept of interference. The more connections, the more chaos, and the harder it is to cull any meaning from the seas of signed, right? Rising complexity, mo money, mo problems, not the other way around. Call their gloom outmoded. Okay, Gilder would call their gloom outmoded, right? That the postmodernists were wrong. This will simplify things. Their metaphor infected with the deficiencies of the transistor. Oh, and it provided, the other thing about the internet is it provided a huge money sink, a easy way to scam people the world over. I think probably the African prince who needs just a little bit of help, like he is a legend who will live like Ajax or Achilles. Like people will probably know who he is till the end of time. So yeah, he's upbeat. Gilder calls their gloom outmoded. Their metaphor infected with the deficiencies of the transistor. Quote, in all networks of wires and switches, except for those on the microchip, complexity tends to grow exponentially as the number of interconnections rises. But in the silicone maze of microchip technology, efficiency, not complexity, grows as the square of the number of interconnections to be organized, end quote. Rather than a vacuous TV culture smothered in cruddy images, Gilder foresees a TC culture redeemed by a whole lot more to choose from and a whole lot more control over what you choose to ... right, ellipses, see, question mark, pseudo experience, dream, right? Like some sort of manic fever dream. It'd be unrealistic to think that expanded choices alone would resolve our televisual bind. The advent of cable upped choices from 4 to 5 to 40 plus synchronistic alternatives, with little apparent loosening of television's grip on mass attitudes and aesthetics. It seems rather that Gilder sees the 90s impending breakthrough as U.S. viewers' graduation from passive receptions of facsimiles of experience to active manipulation of facsimiles of experience. It's worth questioning Gilder's definition of televisual passivity, though. His new tech would indeed end the passivity of mere reception, but the passivity of audience, the acquiescence inherent in a whole culture of and about watching, looks unaffected by telecomputers. The appeal of watching television has always involved fantasy. Contemporary TV, I've claimed, has gotten vastly better at enabling the viewer's fantasy that he can transcend the limitations of individual human experience, that he can be inside the set, imagoed, anyone, anywhere. Since the right, and that's what a lot of the advertising sells, yes? Since the limitations of being one human being involve certain restrictions on the number of different experiences possible to us in a given period of time, it's arguable that the biggest TV tech advances of recent years have done little but abet this fantasy of escape from the defining limits of being human. Right? Everyone's just looking for the next best thing, right? Everyone's looking for their way out. Everyone's looking for their FU money. Cable expands our choices of evening realities. Handheld gizmos let us leap instantly from one to another. VCRs let us commit experiences to an edited memory that permeates or that permits re-experience at any time without loss or alteration. These advances sold briskly and upped average viewing doses, but they sure haven't made U.S. televisual culture any less passive or cynical. And then it hasn't changed the fact that it's allowed a lot of predators and creeps to predate on a populace who's been conditioned to be passive receivers and consumers. So the downside of TV's big fantasy is that it's just fantasy. As a special treat, my escape from the limits of genuine experience is neato. And my steady diet, though, it can't help but render my own reality less attractive, because in it I'm just one Dave, with limits and restrictions all over the place. And more than ever, right? Render me less fit to make the most of it, because I spend all my time pretending I'm not in it, right? It's alienation, it's disassociation. I mentioned the other day that as he mentions that people get separated by glass and screen and lose touch with reality, that it is a real phenomenon, and that people just fail to understand reality. Maybe they never learned in the first place, because that's kind of what it is to be a perambulating dislocation of all thought, born into this modern infantile civilization who thinks itself advanced but really is not. The individuals and groups, technologies, and the problems it creates and perpetuates. Is my steady diet, right? Okay. So, and he's not just being mawkish, he's not being moralistic, he's getting to a point here. Renders me dependent on the device that affords escape from just what my escapism makes unpleasant. That's what I pointed out earlier in these series. What are all these addictions about in the first place? Why are our Americans so addicted to TV, social media, drugs, suicide, you name it, right? And then we can't even talk about anything serious, right? Like on YouTube, people will say things like unalive. How can you take a culture and a people like this seriously? How can you believe, and how can you do you see how dead it is? And this is what Erich Fromm calls necrophilia, the worship of the dead worshiping the dead, imitating the dead, repeating the dead, chasing after the dead, gonna lock everything down, put it in a straitjacket, figure out how to monetize it, cut it to pieces, sell it off, enslave it. We can own it, we can buy it, you can eat that money, right? So let's see, he goes on, right? The affording the escape from the escapism is part of what makes it unpleasant. It's tough to see how Gilder's soteriological vision of having more control over the arrangement of high quality fantasy bits is going to ease either the dependency that is part of my relation to TV, or the impotent irony I must use to pretend I'm not dependent. Whether passive or active as viewer, I must still cynically pretend, because I'm still dependent, because my real dependency here is not on the single show or few networks any more than the hopheads is on the Turkish florist or the Marseilles refiner. My real right, or the fentanyl addict in the fent. My real dependency is on the fantasies and the images that enables them, and thus on any technology that can make images fantastic. Make no mistake, we are dependent on image technology, and the better tech, the harder we're hooked. And part of not just the evolutionary arms race, but people's obsession with whatever it is about image, has long led us down this path. This has been years in the making. We are reaping what we have sown. So he goes on, we're hooked and we're reaped. The paradox in Gilder's rosy forecast is the same as in all forms of artificial enhancement. The more enhancing the mediation, see for instance binoculars, amplifiers, graphic equalizers, or high-resolution pictures hardly distinguishable from real-life images, right, HDTV, the more, right, it's uncanny when you first see it, even 4K, the more direct, vivid, and real the experience seems, which is to say the more direct, vivid, and real the fantasy independents are. An exponential surge in the mass of televisual images and a commensurate increase in my ability to cut, paste, magnify, and combine them to suit my own fancy can do nothing but render my interactive TC, my telecomputer, my smartphone, my pocket addiction a more powerful enhancer and enabler of fantasy. My attraction to that fantasy stronger, the real experiences of which my TC offers, more engaging and controllable simulacrum, paler and more frustrating to deal with, and me just a whole lot more dependent on my furniture. Jacking the number of choices and options up with better tech will remedy exactly nothing. So long as no sources of insight on comparative worth, no guides to why and how to choose among experiences, fantasies, beliefs, and predilections. Oh God, in step Big Brother, right? In step your authorities, in step an internet that is now owned by a few tech companies in a world that's owned by a few people are permitted serious consideration in U.S. culture. Insights and guides to human value used to be among literature's jobs, didn't they? Right? And you could argue what's the point of literature, reading and writing, right? It's the voice of one absent, as Freud said. It's communicating to those aren't here, who aren't, it's the voice of those who aren't present to further update their model, right? So again, we live by the voices of the dead, and people, you see how it drives them crazy, essentially, you know. But so he goes on to say that basically he's saying there's no meritocratic system here. And when there's no meritocratic system to organize anything, you know who takes over? Pirates. In modern terms, they wear suits and we call them capitalists. So we're basically, when you live on a pirate ship that's bound for the rocks, and the ship of fool is led by pirates who are fools, see where it's going. So he says, with no meritocracy, with no insights and guides to human values, with the absence of literature and with the absence of anyone to do its job, now you guys, what you have journalism, you have social media, you have blogs, you have average everyday people offering endless opinions, and very little of it ever gets any attention. Um, right? Because that is the larger currency within the televisual culture, and everyone's fighting it over it, and everyone, just like I mentioned with the the um, the African prince who just needs a little bit of your money, and he's on the up and up, and then he'll be sure to pay you back. It's no different with the rest of the premise of how this stuff works. Um, Insights and Guides to Human Value used to be literature's job. Right, so we don't have literature anymore. And usually what's produced is just commercially viable products. So when everything's products of products and products designed to sell more products, products with advertising within the products, products designed to just sell advertising, which is what journalism and television has long been, right? Um, but he goes on. So it used to be literature's guide, right? And then other things like, you could say to people have had other ideals, right? To comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted, to make you question how you've been living your life, to update your model, to challenge you, to help you create new things, to help you learn, all number of things, right? So it's not just one purpose. But then who's going to make, right? Just, I guess you could say, as a technology, sure enough, reading and writing, it works on, like, some people worship the tool. Some people are like children, right? They worship the medium, they worship the art. So long as you worship art, you will never get out from under its shadow. So long as you worship technology, you will never get out from its shadow, right? It will always be bigger and more imposing than you. And again, there's a reason why people in the future, there'll be some people who know Homer while everyone else is a slave to technology, but no one will actually remember the captains of industry or the capitalists. No one will want to remember. And if anything, they'll just have they'll be probably owned by different pirates who go by very different names and use very different language. Um, so, but who's going to want to take such stuff seriously in a static post-TV life with Kim Basinger waiting to be interacted with? Oh, made me think of Alec Baldwin, but maybe you want to avoid him. My God, I've just reread my heartfelt criticism of Gilder, that he is naive, that he's an apologist for cynical corporate self-interest, that his book has commercials. Oh, God. That under its futuristic novelty is just the same old American same old that has got us into this televisual mess. The Gilder vastly underestimates the intractability of the mess, its hopelessness, our fatigue. My attitude reading Gilder is sardonic, aloof, jaded. My reading of Gilder is televisual. I am in the aura. If you remember to the talk of the world's most photographed barn, right? We are in the aura. We can't actually see what the barn looks like. We can't see ourselves clearly. We've seen too many images of it and we've lost our minds. So, well, but at least Gilder is unironic. In this respect, he's like a cool summer breeze compared to Mark Lehner, the young New Jersey writer whose 1990 My Cousin, My Gastroenterologist is the biggest thing for campus hipsters since the Dharma Bums. Lehner's ironic cyberpunk novel exemplifies a third kind of literary response to our problem. For of course, young U.S. writers can resolve the problem of being trapped in the televisual aura the same way French post-structuralists resolve their being enmeshed in the logos. We can solve the problem by celebrating it, transcend feeling of mass-defined angst by genuflecting to them. We can be reverently ironic. He goes on, My Cousin, My Gastroenterologist, right, which is a book. Basically, it was a book showing you what a like chopped up schizoid staccato imagistic future looks like, right? Dark image future. My gastroenterologist is new, not so much in kind as in degree. It's a methadrine compound of pop pastiche, offhand high tech, and dazzling televisual parody. Basically, it reads like Twitter before there was Twitter, but probably more intelligent than Twitter. Formed with surreal juxtapositions and grammarless monologues and flash cut editing, and framed with the relentless irony designed to make its frantic tone seem irreverent instead of repulsive. You want send-ups of commercial culture? I just been fired from McDonald's for refusing to wear a kilt during production launch week for new McHaggis sandwich. He picks up a copy of Das Plump Denken, New England's most disreputable German language news magazines. Blastin' Egg Cream Factory kills philatelist. He turns the page. Radioactive glow-in-the-dark semen found in Canada. He turns the page. Modern day Hottentots carry young in resealable sandwich bags. He turns the page. Wayne Newton calls mother's womb single occupancy Garden of Eden. Morgan Fairchild calls Sally Struthers Lonnie Anderson. What color is your mozzarella? I asked the waitress. It's pink. It's the same color as the top of Men and Ladies Speed Stick dispenser. You know the color? No, ma'am. I said it's the same color you use for the Gillette Daisy disposable razor for women. You know that color? Nope. Well, it's the same pink as Pepto-Bismol. You know that color? Oh yeah, I said. Well, do you have spaghetti? Do you want more than send-ups of television? Muriel got the TV guide, flipped to Tuesday 8 p.m. and read aloud. There's a new show called A Tumult of Pubic Hair and Bobbing Flaccid Penises Are Sweaty Naked Chubby Men Run from the Sauna Screaming Snake, Snake. It also stars Brian Keith, Buddy Ebsen, Nipsey Russell, and Leslie Ann Warren. You like mocking self-reference? The novel's whole last chapter is a parody of its own About the Author page, or maybe you're into hip identitylessness. Grandma rolled up a magazine and hit Buzz on the side of the head. Buzz's mask was knocked loose. There was no skin beneath that mask. There were two white eyeballs protruding on stems from a mass of oozing blood-red musculature. I can't tell if she's human or fifth-generation genomorphic android, and I don't care. Parodic meditations on the boundaryless flux of televisual monoculture? Question mark. I'm stirring a pitcher of Tanqueray martinis with one hand and sliding a tray of frozen clams organetta into the oven with my foot. God, these methadone suppositories that Yogi Thaldas gave me are good. As I iron a pair of tennis shorts, I dictate a haiku into the tape recorder and then do three minutes on the speed bag before making an origami praying mantis and then reading an article in High Fidelity magazine as I stir the food. Right, so this whole, do you see how basically this is our dark image future? This is your social media feed. This is Twitter, right? And so David Foster goes on to ask you, how about the decay of both the limits and the integrity of the single human self? He goes on to quote the book, My Cousin, the Gastroenterologist. There was a woman with the shrunken, wrinkled face of an 80 or 90-year-old, and this withered hag, this apparent octogenarian, had the body of a male Olympic swimmer, the long, lean, sinewy arms, the powerful V-shaped upper torso without a single ounce of fat, ... To install your replacement head, the head assembly, he goes on, to install your replacement head, place the head assembly on neck housing and insert guide pins through mounting holes. If, after installing new head, you are unable to discern the contradictions in capitalist modes of production, you have either installed your head improperly or head is defective. Pretty good, right? So, in fact, one of my gastroenterologist's unifying obsessions is this latter juxtaposition of parts of selves, people and machines, human subjects and discrete objects. Lehner's fiction is, in this regard, an eloquent reply to Gilder's prediction that our TV culture's problems can be resolved by the dismantling of images into discrete chunks we can recombine as we fancy. Lehner's world is a Gilder-esque dystopia. The passivity and schizoid decay still endure for Lehner in his character's reception of images and waves of data. The ability to combine them only adds a layer of disorientation. When all experience can be deconstructed and reconfigured, there become simply too many choices, and in the absence of any credible non-commercial guides for living, the freedom to choose is about as liberating as a bad acid trip. Each quantum of datum is as good as the next, and the only standard of an assembly's quality is its weirdness. Ooh, it's a purple cow, right? Stand out from the herd. Quality is its weirdness, incongruity, its ability to stand out from a crowd of other image constructs and wow some audience, right? It's actually taught as marketing. There's marketing books on this kind of stuff, right? Basically how to be creative for non-creative people, aka commercialism. So Lehner's novel and its amphetaminic, it's mass production, right? That's what I'm talking about. That's what this is about. Lehner's novel and its amphetaminic eagerness to wow the reader, are no different than social media, marks the dark frontier of the fiction of image. Literature's absorption of not just the icons, techniques, and phenomenon of television, but of television's whole objective. My gastroenterologist's sole aim is, finally, to wow, to ensure that the reader is pleased and continues to read. The book does this by, one, flattering the reader with appeals to his erudite postmodern Weltschmerz, and two, relentlessly reminding the reader that the author is smart and funny. Look how clever I am, look how witty I am. Like that was, again, back to Twitter, back to X, right? The reduction of humans to wit, the reduction of people to fragments of selves and parts of selves, caricatures of being, no values, though. It's not that funny things happen here, it's that funny things are self-consciously imagined and pointed out, like the comedian stock, you ever notice how, or you ever wonder what would happen if, right? So it winds up being like, it's redundant at this point. It's a long commercialized shtick. So actually, Lehner's whole high images style most often resembles a kind of lapidary stand-up comedy. And he goes on to give you another example. Suddenly, Bob couldn't speak properly. He had suffered some form of spontaneous aphasia, but it wasn't total aphasia. He could speak, but only in staccato telegraphic style. Here's how he described driving through the Midwest on Interstate 80. Corn, 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 Stuckies, corn, 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 Stuckies. There's a bar on the highway which caters almost exclusively to authority figures, and the only drink it serves is light beer, and the only food it serves is surf and turf, and the place is filled with cops and state troopers and gym teachers and green berets and toll attendants and game wardens and crossing guards and umpires. Lehner's fictional response to television is less a novel than a piece of witty, erudite, extremely high-quality prose television. Velocity and vividness, the wow, replace the literary of actual development. People flicker in and out. Events are garishly there and then gone and never referred to. There's a lot of modern writing, not just in TV and movies, but in general, just is like this. You can see that everyone has been turned into TV brains, and that carried into internet brains. There's a brashly irreverent rejection of outmoded concepts like integrated plot or enduring character. Instead, there's a series of dazzlingly creative parodic vignettes, increasingly indistinguishable from reality, right? Designed to appeal to the 45 seconds of near Zen concentration we call the TV attention span. Unifying the vignettes in the absence of plots are moods, antic anxiety, the overstimulated stasis of too many choices and no chooser's manual. irreverent brashness toward televisual reality, and after the manner of pop films, music videos, dreams, and television programs, recurring key images. Here, exotic drugs, exotic technology, exotic food, exotic bowel dysfunctions. It's no accident that my cousin, my gastroenterologist's central preoccupation is with digestion and elimination. Its mocking a challenge to the reader is the same as televisual's flood of realities and choices. Absorb me. Prove you're consumer enough. Lehner's work, the best image fiction yet, is both amazing and forgettable, wonderful and oddly hollow. I'm finishing up by talking about it at length because in its masterful reabsorption of the very features TV had absorbed from postmodern literature, right, it seems as of now that the ultimate the ultimate union of U.S. television and fiction, TV, okay. It seems as of now the ultimate union of U.S. television and fiction. It seems also to limn the qualities of image fiction itself in stark relief. The best stuff the subgenres produced to date is hilarious, upsetting, sophisticated, and extremely shallow, and just plain doomed by its desire to ridicule a TV culture whose ironic mockery of itself and all outdated value absorbs all ridicule, right? It's a stalemate, it's a dead end, it's a stasis. Lehner's attempt to respond to television via ironic genuflection is all too easily subsumed into the tired televisual ritual of mock worship. It just, before you realize it, what once began as a organic reaction and a joke just becomes a hollow and empty ritual. And then you can go around asking people, hey, why do you watch the media you do? Why do you make the content you do? Why do you edit it like you do? Do you know where these trends and things even came from? And they'll just look at you like putting up a Christmas tree. No one knows where it comes from. They just do it, right? This is a lot of culture. You can ask people why they do it. They don't have an answer. And when they do, it's often framed in mythology. So within televisual culture and now telecomputer, aka internet culture, right? The whole thing has become mock worship. While the whole thing was going in a mock worship direction, basically the corporation bought it and now owns it. Well, they didn't buy it, they stole it, including everyone's data. But again, this has been par for the course. This is the pirate ship of fools, right? Entirely possible that my plangent cries about the impossibility of rebelling against an aura that promotes and attenuates all rebellion, right? Again, it's all controlled opposition. It all serves the machine. It's machines serving machines and parts of machines. Humans are reduced to parts of machines and parts of bodies. All rebellion says more about my residency inside the aura, my own lack of vision, right? It's hard to see outside this stuff, guys, than it does about my exhaustion of TUS fiction's possibilities, right? He's admitting that he doesn't have all the answers and he doesn't know the end of the line, even though this is the end of the line. The next real literary rebels in this country might well emerge as some weird bunch of anti-rebels, born oglers who dare to back away from ironic watching, who have the childish gall actually to endorse single entendre values, who treat old untrendy human troubles and emotions in U.S. life with reverence and conviction, who eschew self-consciousness and fatigue, right? It's boring at this point. All this irony is boring. These anti-rebels could be outdated, of course, before they even started. Too sincere, clearly repressed, backwards, quaint, naive, anachronistic, right? Basically, or men, or, just even conservative is like a slur these days. Maybe that'll be the point, or pejorative. Why they'll be the next real rebels. Real rebels, as far as I can see, risk things, risk disapproval. The old postmodern insurgents risk the gasp and squeal, shock and disgust and outrage and censorship, accusations of socialism, anarchism, nihilism, nowadays accusation of conservatism. The new rebels might be the ones willing to risk the yawn, the rolled eyes, the cool smile, the nudged ribs, the parody of gifted ironists, the how banal, accusations of sentimentality, melodrama, credulity, willingness to be suckered by a world of lurkers and starers and creeps and weirdos who fear, gaze, and ridicule above imprisonment without law. Let me repeat that. Accusations of sentimentality, melodrama, credulity, willingness to be suckered in a world of lurkers and starers who fear, gaze, and ridicule above imprisonment without law. Right? So you wonder why people go along with the crowd. You wonder why people will commit atrocity, because they're more afraid of judgment or being seen. They're more afraid of the people around them, and they are obviously insecure with themselves enough that they fear actually being looked at and being judged more than they do actually being imprisoned without law. It's kind of fascinating take on human psychology, you think? I think so. Who knows? Today's most engaged young fiction does seem like some kind of lines ends line. I guess that means we all get to draw our own conclusions. Have to. Are you immensely pleased? Are you not entertained? Right? Russell Crowe, um, the Gladiator. So that's a lot to cover. You see the problem is old, you see the problems are deep. Right. This wasn't this decade, it's not this century, it's not even this millennia. We've long been obsessed with tools and image worship. And the way our culture has reached its stasis provides the perfect cover of which, Klages kind of alludes to, that the captains of industry, the people who actually don't want to be known or remembered, um, the shadowy figures who kind of sanction the screens and what's behind the screens and allow it to be disseminated, and also further, if for the last 50 to 100 years have curated and prefabricated how the people who absorb the material should be, you see that we are at an end of the line. And if you don't understand what that is that the technology exists, the power exists. The purpose of what the tool is used for exists. The masses constantly concern themselves with the technology and with the money are slave concerns. That is not the same as the people who make and own and produce the text concerns, right? The captains of industry are here to own the place and wage the war. They're here to own the people who think that they're the ones the solutions are created for, right? So again, within this larger superstructure, all criticism that is reabsorbed and deployed and used by the machine, by the commercial capitalistic machine, including all the art that's created therein and then copied and pasted therein, right? It all serves one end, and it's to remember, the convenient part is that within civilizational centers in modern era, we get to forget that there's a war perpetually raging. That it's always been this way. It's just once humans didn't have to know about it, now they know about it, or at least they're somewhat aware that things are happening outside their tiny corner of the universe, and maybe, just maybe, their tiny narrow worldview isn't the only thing or the only way or the only real thing, and that is exactly with a TC culture, smothered and sold cruddy images, that we are buried in this, to where the individual, like he says, this idea that, and what about a devalued, cut to pieces individual where people are just judged by selves and parts of selves, that, you could argue that the human being has been fully, you could say, chopped up and put on the market for sale, and there's whole industries dealing with body parts. And as he says, if Nietzsche, for instance, once said the spirit is a stomach, you see that culture has ruined its own stomach, the society has ruined its own stomach, and that the irony and the tyranny of the irony is it's a response to said ruined stomach. So in the world of 1984, the tyranny of the irony is that it's so bad you have to perpetually remove the evil. The evil ceases to exist because within the illusion of modern civilization, you get to have your cake and eat it too. But really, everyone is paying the price in one way or another. Everyone's being sold out in one way or another. Everything was stolen one way or another. Everything's been robbed and devalued, one another, chief of all the individual, because the individual ceases to exist, right? So I hope you either see or are beginning to see a wider scope here, what it pertains, what it means for the past, what it means for the present, and what it means for our future. Again, this has been our ongoing review of David Foster Wallace's Unibus Pluram. I'll probably come back, maybe do one more look at a few key beats on it, and then wrap it up for this time around. Maybe I'll come back in the future, do another run of it, touch on some other things I didn't mention this time, because it's like a 50-page essay. Anyway, thanks again for your time. I appreciate it. Again, I'm Zachariah Morkowski with Sharper Pen Image Consulting. Drop me a line if you need anything. Please feel free to comment, concern, like, share, ask your questions on the literature, pose your ideas. Once I get more responses, I'll begin to do response videos of and for, user responses about the material, the literature. Thanks again. Hope you're having a good day. Appreciate your time and attention. Thanks for checking me out. Thanks for checking out the channel, and have a good one wherever